The Miami Hurricanes have just landed an important transfer player at a big-time position of need. This man is taking each and every one of his 305 pounds down to the 305. CJ Clark, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
CJ Clark is a Cane. We got the latest info on the Miami Hurricanes transfer quarterback targets. And guys, we have a huge weekend of official visits in progress with a combination of other important transfer portal targets, including Zach Carpenter, who is the guy Miami wants to replace Matt Lee at center. And another defensive tackle, Marley Cook, is in town visiting, and a bunch of important high school players. This is a crazy weekend. It's why I've got my spatula. And guys, as I've mentioned before on the show, I do have in my possession a Miami Hurricanes themed spatula that one of our listeners, Nick, sent to me. I'm going to be unveiling it when the next flip officially happens, right? When the next flip officially happens, I will unveil the orange and green spatula. I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We are live right now, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. CJ Clark, former NC State nose tackle, is coming down to Miami to play defensive tackle for Joe Salavea, Jason Taylor on Lance Guidry's defense. I think CJ Clark is going to fit here and really have a productive season coming up for Miami. I mentioned 305 pounds. Clark is 6'3", and he's a graduate transfer with one final year of eligibility left. And obviously, there was a big-time need for an experienced guy like CJ Clark because, some people maybe a few weeks ago, you would have hoped and wondered, is Leonard Taylor going to come back for another year? Leonard Taylor is off to the NFL, so you can kind of view CJ in a way as Leonard Taylor's replacement on this roster. And obviously, I think Leonard Taylor has like more upside, but maybe CJ Clark seems to be more consistent game to game, probably a higher floor and a lower ceiling. And I don't want to downplay what CJ Clark brings to the table because this is an excellent player. And NC State is not happy that they lost this guy. And I'm sure they're especially not happy that, they lost him and he stays in the conference and he goes to play for a team that NC State just beat this past year. CJ Clark in his career so far at NC State, he's recorded 72 tackles, 4 sacks. I somehow combined those into one word, and 7.5 tackles for loss over the past 4 seasons with the Wolfpack. And Clark, he was a regular starter on the Wolfpack defense. He started all 12 games at NC State this past season, including the game against Miami, where NC State, they obviously, Tyler Van Dyke played really poorly, but NC State's defense played awesome in that game. Clark included. Clark in that game against Miami, he sacked Tyler Van Dyke, and he recorded 3 tackles in that game. So I also want to give you guys, because I did reach out to my very good friend and colleague at the Locked On Network, Kenton Gibbs. Kenton Gibbs is a former NC State defensive lineman. He's also the host of Locked On Wolfpack, and, he has scouted CJ Clark very closely for the past 4 years at NC State. So I reached out to Kenton, who's also my co-host during the college football season on Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Like, I asked Kenton, any scouting report you can give me from your perspective on CJ Clark, and what can Miami fans expect from him? And Kenton responded to me, said, excellent run stuffer. He has some pass rush juice, he said, but truly excels in 2-gap situations. He also has a temper at times, but does a great job of controlling it and playing with passion while not being penalized. I love that last part, right? I mean, anybody who's been a fan of Miami football, going back to the glory days like me, maybe some of you in here are like 25 years old. You don't remember the 80s and 90s, which is not your fault. But those of us who go way back, right? I mean, being able to play with passion and a little bit of a temper and a mean streak, without necessarily hurting your team with penalties is important. We want this guy to have some swag. We want CJ Clark to have some swag here for this Miami defense. And yes, the early part of that scouting report as well, being an excellent run stuffer. That's exactly, what Miami needs at the defensive tackle spot. And yeah, the Hurricanes had one of the best rushing defenses in the country this past season. And when you add players like CJ Clark to your roster, you can expect that to continue. And, at the linebacker level, Kiko Mauinoa being back for another year, he was one of the top run stuffing linebackers in college football this past season. Things are lining up very, very nicely for Lance Guidry's defense. I saw somebody in the comment section here. So since I'm solo today, I'm having a hard. The comments are coming in fast and furious. But one of you guys mentioned that this is like an early Christmas gift for Lance Guidry, and indeed it is, getting CJ Clark. And guys, and remember, on this episode we are going to talk about Miami's quarterback pursuit, the latest on Cam Ward, the latest on Will Howard. Also on this episode, we are going to talk about a really massive list of official visitors who are on campus now at Miami. And if you compare Miami's visitor list to the University of Florida visitors list, Florida has mostly walk-ons. Final visit weekend before National Signing Day. Florida's got mostly walk-ons visiting. Miami's got a handful of flip candidates visiting this weekend. But let's talk about Miami's defensive tackle situation now that CJ Clark has been added to the mix, okay? He's on the way in, of course, Clark. 1 year of eligibility left. I think he's going to be an important, experienced presence on that defensive line. I expect him to start. Miami is also trying to land Middle Tennessee State transfer Marley Cook, who they're very high on. And I think Marley Cook is very high on Miami because he was supposed to visit Ohio State this weekend. He canceled that trip in favor of Miami. This is another 300-plus pound D tackle Miami's trying to close. Miami is, I think we're expecting Jared Harrison Hunt back for his 6th year. Anthony Campbell, who didn't play much, transferred in last year. I think he's a 6th-year guy as well. You've got younger defensive tackles on the roster that are hopefully ready to take a step up this year, like Ahmad Moten and Joshua Horton. Horton was a true freshman this season. And when Lance Guidry talked about Horton, just basically said he was at a disadvantage because he wasn't an early enrollee. Like, Lance Guidry's defense is not that friendly for true freshmen, especially when you don't arrive early. The guys who arrived last spring had a big advantage, whereas Horton didn't arrive till the summer. So I think we're still very high on Horton, that he could end up having a breakout year, whether it's this coming year or the year after. Of course, let's not forget we have the reigning ACC Defensive Player of the Year on that defensive line in Ruben Bain, who's already one of the top D linemen in the country. And, he plays a lot of interior downs in addition to playing on the edge. So he can be a factor in that defensive tackle rotation as well. Coming in as true freshman, Miami has Justin Scott, the 5-star who flipped from Ohio State. Miami's got 4-star Artavius Jones, who's a big-time player, and Dalen Russell on the way in. And Armando Blunt, he's officially visiting. Blunt has been projected by most of the crystal balls to actually flip back from Florida State to Miami. And Armando's family have been pretty active, posting pictures on social media of Blunt's visit to Miami that's in progress right now. In fact, I think it was his mother who just sent out a photo within the last couple of hours of Armando Blunt talking with Ruben Bain, right? The Miami Central connection. And yeah, Armando can look at Ruben and say, man, I want to do what you just did. Like, you were just the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. You played a lot here as a true freshman. You made an impact. I would like to do what you just did there. So, folks, it's crazy to me how for so long during this past season and last offseason, when Miami had difficulties last offseason, recruiting certain defensive tackles and landing certain guys in the transfer portal. Defensive tackle has been a big area of need. You can consider that need addressed, right? Where we had conversations as recently as a few weeks ago about how Miami might be in trouble recruiting and adding defensive tackles. That's gone from a position of need to now looking like a big-time position of strength, right? They're revolutionizing the defensive line this offseason the way that they revolutionized the offensive line last year. So that's a really, really good sign. All right, guys, we're only getting started here on this episode of Locked On Canes because we have to talk about the quarterback mania when we come back. Cam Ward's Florida State visit is finished. His visits, period, are finished. He's not taking any more. So, is it a classic Miami versus Florida State battle for the top transfer portal quarterback in the country? We will discuss right here on Locked On Canes. Guys, I am only getting started. Let me get the right tag up there with Game Time. Guys, buying last-minute tickets should not be a stressful experience, and it isn't a stressful experience with Game Time. On the Game Time app, you can get these amazing flash deals, not only up to the day of the event, but in some cases, an hour into the event. You could still buy amazing tickets with the best possible deals at Game Time. It takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, including sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, musical theater. I think I've bought tickets at Game Time to basically every category of those events in the past. And guys, the Game Time guarantee is incredible. That means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So not only do the deals tend to get better the closer you get to the event, which is uncommon with other ticket services, Game Time is incredible that way. But folks, you can even get seat view photos. You'll see on Game Time exactly what you're going to be seeing and what angle you're going to be seeing it from at your seat, which is awesome because sometimes you just don't know. I've had it happen before where I bought tickets for a concert thinking this is a great seat, and then I realized the angle compared to the stage is all off when I get there. You don't have to worry about that with Game Time. So guys, you need to check it out. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today and your first watch. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. I like this. Brian's got his spatula. It was part of your wedding present. That's fantastic. So whoever gave that to you, Brian, whoever gave that to you as a wedding present probably figured this guy's going to use it for actual cooking. Little did he know we would be using it as props when Mario Cristobal starts flipping players left and right. So I appreciate you guys chiming in. All right. Here is the latest on Cam Ward, top quarterback in the transfer portal, who took a midweek visit to the University of Miami, then took a late week visit Thursday into Saturday morning at Florida State. Came to find out this morning that Ward, he must have left Tallahassee very early this morning because there are no direct flights from Tallahassee to Houston. You've got to make 1 to 2 connections. It's a whole mess getting back and forth in there. But he must have left very early this morning because as of about 10 a.m. today, he was already back in Houston. He's already back home in Texas, and he's thinking things over, Ward. So Ward has taken an official visit to Florida State. Before that, he took an official visit to Miami. He's now thinking it over. Now, according to Cam Ward's father, there will be no more visits, okay? Which, obviously I'd say that's good news for both. That's good news for Florida State, and it's good news for Miami, because one of the things we had been, maybe anticipating, if you've been reading the message boards the last couple days, there was some optimism from Auburn that they might be able to get Ward in for a visit starting today, that he might leave Tallahassee and go straight to Auburn instead of going home to Houston. But that did not happen. Visit has not materialized for Auburn. His father did mention something about maybe they'll do some Zoom calls with teams, but, obviously you'd much rather have the in-person visit than a Zoom call. So that definitely puts Miami and Florida State in an advantage. So I would imagine here that here's the situation. Now that Ward, he's fishing. He likes to fish. He's back home in Texas doing that. He's going to be thinking about it, talking with family for the next couple of days. I would imagine that this is probably a Miami versus Florida State battle. However, Ward's father did say a night or two ago that they have not closed the door on a possible declaration for the NFL draft, that they're still waiting on kind of finalizing their draft grades, because that's a complicated process. Like it's not like you just email some website and say, hey, what round am I going to get picked in? No, you basically have to put out feelers to all 32 teams to get an idea how they value you to formulate an opinion on what round you might be drafted in. So if they're truly waiting on that, that might take at least a few more days, which complicates the timeline. So I guess my question would be, is it Miami versus Florida State, or is it Miami versus Florida State versus the NFL? Because there is a feeling out there from a lot of people with Cam Ward that they're kind of throwing the NFL option still out in the mix here, maybe as a bluff or as a leverage ploy, right? Because obviously there is NIL at stake here, and there is, being put in the best possible situation at Miami or Florida State at stake here. So it's probably good for your leverage if you throw out the idea that, hey, we're still considering going to the National Football League. So a lot of people feel that it really is Miami versus Florida State, that it's coming down to those two for Cam Ward. And, obviously in situations like this, I try to talk to as many people as possible who cover Florida State. I try to read as much as I can, from, the Florida State recruiting insiders. And so far, the feedback from FSU insiders, they do sound cautiously optimistic that Ward really likes Florida State. Brendan Sinone from the Florida State 24/7 site, he thinks that the Seminoles made a significant move during Cam Ward's trip, okay? And by the way that this is being covered, the Florida State visit, the way it's being covered by FSU people, it's like really strange, because the way that they're writing about Cam Ward, they make it sound like he loves FSU, but that it's Florida State who's unsure if they want him, which is like, that sounds bizarre. We're talking about the top transfer quarterback in the country here. Like, you would feel like if Florida State is trying to find somebody who can, be their next Jordan Travis, or maybe even better, that Ward would be the guy who fits that profile better than DJ Uyunglele, who's visiting Florida State this weekend, right? Like, all things being equal, I would take Ward way before I would take DJ, unless Mike Norvell just knows something that the rest of us don't. So with the way that this is being covered from Florida State people, like, well, Cam Ward loves us, but Norvell's trying to decide if they really love Cam. My guess is that the Florida State folks, they would take him in a heartbeat if he wants to be there. I think by making it sound like he might not be a take for them, I think they're setting themselves up. And I'm not talking about the coaching staff. I'm talking about the people who cover the team. I think they're setting themselves up with a built-in excuse. If he does end up picking Miami, they can say, well, I'm not sure if Norvell really wanted him anyway. So it's crazy. And listen, not everybody, I see Calvin's comment, not everybody sold on Ward. VC says the Tallahassee accent. Honestly, I don't really know if that's the Tallahassee accent. My Tallahassee accent and my Gainesville accent and my Tuscaloosa accent, they're all the same. That's just how I do it. I don't know if that's actually how people talk there. I hope he enjoyed some Guthrie's chicken tenders, indeed, while he was there. Okay, so VC says I nailed the accent. I don't know if we want Ward. Ward wants to be at Florida State. I don't know if Florida State wants Cam Ward. That DJ Uyunglele sounds pretty good right now, if that's what apparently is being talked about in Florida State circles. So again, I would say both of those spots, Miami and Florida State, likely pushed for him to commit there before ending his visit. I know that was the case for Miami. I know Miami was going for the kill. When he was in Miami Tuesday through Thursday, I'm sure that if Ward had told Miami staff, that's it, I'm shutting it down, this is where I want to be, they would have taken his commitment in a heartbeat. I imagine the same was true for Florida State. He has left both visits. He's gone back home now to Texas, and he has not made a final decision. Now, of course, the big question would be, if you're Miami and Florida State, how long can you wait, right? I don't feel like there's necessarily any hard deadline here, because, again, depending on how much you really want this player, like, how do you draw a deadline on that? Like, wait, he might commit to us Tuesday, but on Monday we're going to tell him, no, the offer is pulled. We don't want, like, it's tough. This is a tough, delicate tightrope to walk in. Okay. But if I'm Miami and Florida State, I would imagine you would like an answer from Ward by around Monday, or at the very least, you'd like an answer before National Signing Day. Because obviously, a lot of the players you're trying to close on by National Signing Day may want to have an idea who your quarterback is going to be and what your offense is going to look like next year. So I don't think that there's a hard deadline. And also, I want to bring something up. We're going to talk about Will Howard here for a second, who's Miami's other top choice. Folks, the internet rumor mill from Miami fans gets a little carried away sometimes, okay? Because there seems to be this assumption that's being made by a lot of Miami fans that that Will Howard would commit to Miami right now, but Miami is making him wait on an answer from Cam Ward. I don't know if that's the case, guys. Like, this is being thrown out there. This assumption from Miami's fan base is that, hey, you should tell Cam Ward to kick rocks and just take Will Howard today. I mean, do you really know that Will Howard is I think he's still making up his mind as well. In fact, it's not like Will Howard is sitting at home waiting for his phone to ring with Mario Cristobal on the other end of the phone. Will Howard is at USC right now, which is not a surprise, right? For the last 5-6 days, it's been apparent that USC and Miami seem to be the favorites for Will Howard, the Kansas State transfer quarterback. He's been at USC visiting this weekend. I think the visit is still in progress as of today. So obviously, if you're a Miami fan monitoring the situation, you don't have an answer yet from Cam Ward. You certainly hope Will Howard ends his USC visit without, committing to them, that he takes more time to think about it. But he posted a photo from the LA Coliseum yesterday, so he's definitely in Los Angeles right now. And I think LA really, or the Trojans, I should say, really like him. Of course, their head coach does have a proven track record in not only developing quarterbacks, but helping quarterbacks win Heisman trophies. He's done that multiple times. So that definitely gives Will Howard something to think about. And I know, like, Miami is working tirelessly on this. Now, 904 Hurricane asks a great question. Who is Miami going to pursue if Howard commits to USC and Ward commits to Florida State? The answer is, I don't know, but I have heard there is a plan C out there that I guess the staff is keeping this very tight-lipped. And it's probably good you keep it tight-lipped, because if that name is getting thrown out there, how would that player feel? Like, wait, I'm the third option? So I am confident that Miami is having conversations with, quarterbacks who are not named Cam Ward and Will Howard, but I think they're waiting to see how things shake out with their top two options first. There are definitely conflicting reports out there as to whether or not Miami is truly interested in Dante Moore, who's heading into his second year, the UCLA transfer. I have heard from some people that are pretty reliable that I talked to about these matters that, Miami would not be opposed to trying to get a veteran or an upperclassman like Ward or Howard, in addition to a younger guy who fits that Dante Moore profile. So I wouldn't completely rule that out as well. And gosh, Cliff, I hope you're wrong about that. The top quarterbacks don't want Miami, he says. I hope you're wrong about that. All right, guys, huge weekend of official visits in progress, which means we're not done, man. This live episode of Locked On Canes will continue to roll on. So you know what you want to do? You want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Now, I know you're keeping it locked to Prize Picks. This is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money during football season and basketball season. And you can play in combo leagues where you have football selections and basketball selections. Guys, if you haven't tried Prize Picks, I don't know what you're waiting for. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play DFS, because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. And there are a wide variety of different stat projections to choose from. And again, guys, you can 25x your money. You can turn $10 into $250 with just a handful of clicks, guys. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. You'll be so happy you have it. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedon and use code LOCKEDON for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedon. Locked On College. Prizepicks.com/Locked On College, and use code word, all one word, Locked On College, for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks truly is daily fantasy sports made easy. Thank you so much for making this live episode of Locked On Canes your first listen today. Yes, and Nick, I just talked about this earlier. I have received the spatula. Nick is the one who was nice enough to send me the Miami Hurricanes orange and green spatula. And I told the people, Nick, I'm going to unveil the real spatula. I've got the lesser spatula here. I'm going to unveil the Hurricane spatula when Miami makes their next flip. So whether that be Armando Blunt, whether it be Jordan Lyle, maybe a Darius Hayes, maybe Xavier Lucas, I will be unveiling the Miami Hurricane spatula at that time. And I appreciate you sending that to me. Nick is a true mensch out there. All right, so guys, here's a look at the players that are visiting, and a couple notes. By the way, we mentioned earlier Armando Blunt on campus. His family is sending out photos of him hanging out with Ruben Bain, another former Miami Central High School stud. And the Canes are practicing today. Today was the first day of bowl practices. I think Miami's going to practice about 7 times before the Pinstripe Bowl on December 28th against Rutgers. So during the past week, this is their first formal practice today. Over the past week, they've had some player-led activities, so workouts and stuff without all the coaches being on hand. But like today has been the official practice number 1 of about 7 before they take on Rutgers at the Pinstripe Bowl. And so it's actually kind of cool. The timing works out with all these important official visitors getting to actually watch Miami grinding out there practicing. Because one thing I know talking to a lot of recruits in recent years is they love to see what the day-to-day routine looks like, right? They love to see how the practices are run, how the coaches handle things. And they're usually pretty impressed with the way Miami does things because the pace and the intensity in practice is very high. And I would imagine today is no exception to that. Okay. So Miami has 5-star Florida State committed defensive lineman Armando Blunt visiting. He's been projected to flip back to Miami. Remember, he was a Miami commit, flipped to Florida State. Now he might be flipping back. Miami's got linebacker Darius Hayes, a Florida commit, visiting today. Now, I don't think it's like as done of a deal with Darius Hayes. Obviously, him spending his final visit weekend before National Signing Day at Miami and not at Florida is pretty telling. And I know there's a lot of and Florida's losing a ton of players. So there's definitely some panic from the Florida side that Darius is going to flip to Miami. He hasn't received any crystal balls or anything like that, but I imagine this is something that's probably going to happen. But I'm a little bit less confident with Darius than I am with Armando Blunt, for example, because we haven't really seen the smoking guns with that yet. But he's on campus, and Miami is working hard to try and flip Darius Hayes, and he was photographed throwing up the U yesterday when he arrived on campus, so that's good. There's a bunch of players who are already committed to Miami who are visiting, which is important, of course. Wide receiver Nikar, 4-star player. Wide receiver JoJo Trader, 4-star, most services, 5-star, I think, by Rivals. Really should be a 5-star player. 4-star, sometimes 5-star safety Zaquan Patterson from Chaminade. Booker Pickett. Here's some of the guys who are not committed to Miami. Running back Jordan Lyle from St. Thomas Aquinas. This is another one. Jordan Lyle, I feel good about where this is trending here. He is being receiving crystal ball predictions to flip to Miami, and that could end up being kind of a double flip because a lot of us are anticipating with Kevin Riley, 4-star running back commit. He's visiting Alabama this weekend, and it sounds like Bama is pulling out all the stops to keep him home. He's from Tuscaloosa County, Alabama. Alabama has him on campus. They are doing whatever they can to keep Kevin Riley home, the same way Miami's doing whatever they can to keep Jordan Lyle home and not go to Ohio State. So unfortunately, Miami may end up losing Riley. I don't think that's a done deal yet. I think there's still a chance Miami can keep Kevin Riley, but I'm definitely on high alert about him flipping to Alabama, the same way Ohio State people are on high alert about Jordan Lyle flipping to Miami. So you may lose one and gain the other, okay? Offensive line, JUCO transfer Markel Bell is on campus visiting. Wisconsin committed defensive back safety Xavier Lucas from American Heritage is visiting. Again, I don't think this one's a done deal yet, but Miami's working really, really hard to get him out of Wisconsin's class. Committed defensive back Ryan Mack is here. Larry Bluestein was singing his praises yesterday. He's a great player. Running back Chris Wheatley Humphrey, committed to Miami, is visiting. edge Cole McConaughey, who's committed to Miami. I think he recently got a 4th star on Rivals. Good for him. He's visiting. And Nino Francavilla, who's going to be a future center. I think the center for this coming season is going to be someone from the transfer portal. Zach Carpenter from Indiana is visiting this weekend, and Miami would love to get him committed from the transfer portal. But Nino Francavilla is going to be a true freshman. I think he's eventually going to be the center of the future. And defensive lineman Dalen Russell is also visiting as well. So this is a monstrous official visit weekend. And if a flip happens today, tomorrow, we're going to have that Miami Hurricane spatula ready. So I want to thank everybody for taking some time. For those who have watched this live, make sure on the way out, you smash that like button and you subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube. And if you're listening back to the audio version, that's awesome. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your pods, and make sure you rate us and review us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform. Paulie asks about the dead period. The dead period starts, I think it officially starts on Monday or Tuesday. I think before the dead period, there's like a quiet period, which is like the yellow light before the red light. So I want to say it's either Monday or Tuesday. I think it's Monday when the dead period officially gets underway. So this is the final weekend of visits before National Signing Day. Thank you so much, Pat Mack. Everyone be like Pat Mack and smash that like button. And we'll talk to you again. Whenever something happens, we'll talk to you again on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.